US President Donald Trump still trying to calm the storm over his meeting with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. On Tuesday, he backpedaled in the face of fierce criticism over the comments he made in Helsinki, which appeared to support Russia over allegations of election meddling. He said he misspoke. Then, in a tweet on Wednesday, he said, "So many people at the higher ends of intelligence loved my press conference performance in Helsinki. Putin and I discussed many important subjects at our earlier meeting. He says we got along well, which truly bothered many haters who wanted to see a boxing match. Big results will come." In a separate tweet, he said, "Some people hate the fact that I got along well with President Putin of Russia. They would rather go to war than see this. It's called Trump derangement syndrome." Well, Caryl is a book author and an opinion editor with the Washington Post. Joins us now from the US Capitol. Good to have you with us, Christian. So what do you make over this explanation he gave about his remarks at the Helsinki press conference? He said would when he shouldn't have said wouldn't.
Well, it's unusual to say the least. Everyone here was really quite astonished by this explanation, I think, precisely because those who watched the press conference saw what he said at the time, and just changing one word doesn't really negate the thrust of his comments, which were quite clearly siding with President Putin against his own intelligence agencies.
But ultimately, despite all the anger we've seen from stalwart Republicans, even allies like Newt Gingrich, Congress has to work with the president. I mean, there's not going to be any kind of revolt, is there?
Well, that's a very good question. Yes, a revolt seems unlikely, but that backlash from a lot of the president's own supporters has been pretty extraordinary here in Washington. I mean, there are a lot of people we never expected to stand up to the president who've stood up to him on this one. The question is, will that just be some passing fluke, or will it represent something deeper? I mean, a lot of Americans, quite honestly, don't care that much about our relationship with Russia. President Trump seems to care about it very much, but to a lot of voters, it's not the first thing on their list when they go to the polls. So we'll have to see how that shakes out, but it really is something extraordinary to see just how people like Newt Gingrich, whom you mentioned there, or prominent commentators on Fox News, which is usually very loyal to the president, have pushed back on this one, and it's really been quite remarkable.
It's interesting to hear or see the president's tweets. He says, people at the higher ends of intelligence loved my press conference performance in Helsinki. Putin and I got along really well. Do you think he's genuinely surprised at the backlash that he got after that press conference in Helsinki? Do you think he genuinely believes he did do a good job with Putin?
Well, that's an excellent question. From all the reporting that we've seen since the press conference, he does indeed seem to have been taken completely off guard by the reaction. There have been several descriptions of how he got onto Air Force One, very pleased with his own performance, and began looking at some of the coverage and the things that people were saying, and became absolutely enraged when he realized that the reaction was overwhelmingly negative. And then it would seem that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Chief of Staff John Kelly and perhaps even National Security Advisor John Bolton got together to persuade the president to read from this prepared statement in which he kind of tried to walk back his initial comments. But as he always does when he's caught doing something that turns out to be hugely unpopular, the president kind of made a halfway apology or correction, and then threw in a few extra remarks in addition to the prepared statement that showed his supporters that he didn't really mean it after all, and that he was really just being bullied into this by his staffers. And he has this habit of just kind of making, sort of a wink to his followers, saying, well, I don't really mean any of this at all. In this case, he made that statement about how he was taking back details in the wording of the press conference. And then he said, yes, and I fully accept that the statement of my intelligence community that this was the Russians. Of course, it could have been other people, too. There are a lot of other people out there. So with one hand, he kind of revises his original remarks. With the other hand, he takes them back.
Christy, good to speak with you. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there. Christy and Caryl there in Washington, D.C.